Here is my countdown of my top 20 stamps of all time. The rankings are very arbitrary, determined solely by me, but I will do my best to explain my logic during the countdown to number 1. Starting the countdown at number 20 is a set of 4 stamps that led to my second stamp collection. This plate number block is one of 20 to 30 blocks that I rediscovered in 1979. During the 1960s, I started accepting a plate block of stamps every week from my mother in lieu of a weekly allowance for chores around the house. We put the blocks in glassine envelopes and they were tucked away in a shoebox when I found them by accident one day. This block of 4 stamps had a special significance as I sent away for a first day of issue cover near the end of 1968. After discovering the missing plate blocks, I decided to start collecting again. I set a goal to collect every plate block from my birth date to the present day. After completing that goal, I started working my way backwards on mint singles, making it all the way back to 1926 before they started getting too pricey. At number 19 is a group of stamps that will be counted as one. Space Achievements, a set of 8 stamps featuring the first reusable manned spacecraft as well as other unmanned craft. Columbia's success changed space travel forever. Space shuttles were designed to be used for multiple launches. Coming in at number 18 is another stamp from space featuring celestial bodies. Earthrise is a photograph of Earth and some of the moon's surface that was taken from lunar orbit by astronaut William Anders on December the 24th, 1968, during the Apollo 8 mission. Nature photographer Galen Rowell declared it the most influential environmental photograph ever taken. The Apollo 8 stamp issue features the same view seen worldwide by audiences during the 1968 Christmas Eve broadcast, while the astronauts read from the Book of Genesis. Here is the full sheet of 50 stamps with mail early in the day and use zip code blocks in addition to the standard plate block. We now travel back in time to 1928 for the number 17 stamp. The beacon atop Mount Sherman in the Rocky Mountains is pictured in this beautifully engraved red, white, and blue issue. The post office had just reduced the airmail rate from 10 cents to 5 cents in an effort to stimulate airmail usage. Beginning with this issue, airmail stamps could no longer be used as a substitute for regular postage. The radio beacon was located on Sherman Hill and was named for the Civil War general William Tecumseh Sherman at his own request. It is the highest point of the original Transcontinental Railroad. Next up, at number 16, is a stamp with a classic tale of horror. This stamp was issued just in time for use on Halloween mail. The stamp pictures a scene from Washington Irving's famous folk tale, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, in which poor Ichabod Crane, the timid schoolteacher, is being chased by the dreaded headless horseman. This stamp was the last in the American Folklore series, which honored some of the people and tales that have played an important role in our nation's culture. Irving's short story remains one of the earliest works of American fiction still widely read today. We return to space again for the next 3 stamps on the countdown. This is the stamp honoring the first moon landing in 1969. This is the single stamp from the pane issued in 1994. As a tribute to this occasion, the Postal Service issued 2 stamps designed by the father and son team of Paul and Chris Cayley. Neil Armstrong's first words upon stepping onto the lunar surface are featured on the stunning pane of 12 stamps. You will see the second stamp in a few minutes. Continuing the space theme is stamp number 14. On July 20th, 1969, the words, "The Eagle has landed," announced man's arrival on the moon. To celebrate the 20th anniversary of this unforgettable event, the Postal Service issued an extraordinary tribute, an oversized priority mail stamp. Priority mail delivered items weighing up to 2 pounds within 2 days between all major U.S. centers. Fellow astronaut Buzz Aldrin joined Armstrong on the surface and described the scene as magnificent desolation. Back on Earth, the world watched through a live television feed. The moonwalk wasn't just symbolic. Armstrong and Aldrin had several tasks to perform. One of them included planting the American flag. They first had to get used to walking around on the moon. We will remain on the lunar surface for stamp number 13 in the countdown. This is the Priority Mail Express stamp, the second of the 25th anniversary first moon landing stamps designed by father and son Paul and Chris Cayley. The image shows the planting of the American flag on the lunar surface by Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, with the Lunar Excursion Module, or LEM, in the background. What is the difference between Priority Mail and Priority Mail Express? The main differences between the two are delivery times and dates. Priority Mail Express gets your letters and packages there faster and can deliver 7 days a week, but you'll pay extra for those services. The other important difference is that Priority Mail Express is a guaranteed service. Number 12 brings us back to Earth for one of my personal favorites. This is the second love stamp in a popular series of stamps now issued almost every year. The first love stamp was issued in 1973. This stamp was issued in 1982. In response to public demand for a new love stamp, this issue was designed by artist Mary Falconer of New York City. Falconer used flowers to give greater feeling to the love theme. Number 11 brings a celebration of one of America's best-loved comic strip characters. Snoopy is featured as the World War I flying ace in this tribute to Peanuts, the long-running daily comic strip by artist Charles Schulz. Schulz created a comic strip that appeared in newspapers for 50 years. Readers identified with Schulz's pint-sized characters, who became part of modern American culture. In the 1960s, the beagle featured on the stamp climbed on top of his doghouse and into his own fantasy. He became a World War I ace pilot pursuing the infamous enemy flyer, the Red Baron. We're halfway through the countdown now, and at number 10, we find a star of the silver screen. The Performing Arts series continued in 1980 with a stamp honoring W.C. Fields on January the 29th, his 100th birthday. It was issued in Beverly Hills, California, and included an illustration of Fields juggling. Fields learned to juggle at an early age and went on to perform a juggling act on Broadway in the Ziegfeld Follies. In 1915, Fields starred in a silent film, but did not win fame until the advent of sound films. By 1931, he had moved to Hollywood, where he began writing, directing, and starring in films. In 1968, my family moved to Central Florida, and I befriended a guy who introduced me to W.C. Fields and his antics. We spent a lot of time enjoying his classic films and caustic humor. Our number 9 stamp takes us back into space for the first Centennial stamps issued in the United States. On September the 29th, 1967, the U.S. Post Office issued its first attached pair of stamps to have a continuous design. The stamps, officially titled Accomplishments in Space, were issued to honor the 9th anniversary of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA. The stamps were the first to be designed by the renowned space artist Paul Cayley. These stamps are also often known as the Space Twins, as they're the first twin stamps ever issued by the U.S., with one design continuing across both stamps. The stamps picture a spacesuited astronaut floating near the Gemini 4 capsule. The astronaut shown is Ed White, the first American astronaut to perform a spacewalk. White's famous spacewalk occurred on June 3, 1965. Although his gas-filled, handheld maneuvering unit ran out of gas after just a few seconds, White used the gold-covered tether to pull himself around in space. White's walk was so special it took the people at NASA several minutes to convince White to get back into the spacecraft. White and 2 other astronauts died in 1967, the year this stamp was issued, when the Apollo 1 space capsule caught fire on the launching pad. Our number 8 stamp is the only U.S. stamp to be issued in complete secrecy. In the early 1960s, the post office started using a Giori printing press, which allowed it to produce stamps in 2 or 3 colors in a single run, instead of having to send the stamps through on separate printing runs for each color. In the summer of 1961, the Post Office Department began a special project. The new Giori press was locked in a separate room, accessed only by a small number of postal employees and with a guard to keep others out. Rumors in the department speculated that it was being used to make currency. Instead, it was printing the Project Mercury stamp. The stamp was sent in sealed packets to postmasters in 305 locations around the country, with specific instructions. Classified material. Do not open. These packets were shipped in time for the original launch date, December the 21st, 1961. Weather delays caused the flight to be pushed to the end of February. The February 20th launch was at 9:48 a.m. local time in Cape Canaveral, Florida, and splashed down at 2:43 p.m. At 3:30 p.m., the post offices were informed by telephone, teletype, and telegraph that they could open the packet and distribute the stamps. If there had been a failure, the stamps would not have been released. One side effect of the late release was that it gave very limited time to get first day covers serviced, an hour and a half in eastern states. Cape Canaveral is listed as the official site of the first day issue. There was no Cape Canaveral post office until 3:30 p.m., February the 20th, 1962. That's when a U.S. Air Force van was made into a temporary post office and called a substation of the Cocoa Beach, Florida post office. Number 7 has a special family significance for me. Our family attended the 1964 and 1965 New York World's Fair during both years. In 1964, I took my first jet aircraft ride from Greensboro, North Carolina to New York, New York. The World's Fair was a real eye-opening experience for a young man from the Carolinas. The stamp was issued on my sister's birthday. We stayed in a Park Avenue apartment and in a mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut on the Long Island Sound. We now make our final visit to space on the countdown. The first Man on the Moon stamp was issued in September 1969 after the July landing that same year. The dies for the printing plates were actually in the lunar module that touched down on the moon's surface. The original plan was to cancel a proof on the moon, but it actually happened after the astronauts returned to the Apollo capsule in the moon's orbit. This is the most popular first day of issue cover of all time, autographed by the famous designer of the stamp, Paul Cayley. Cayley designed over 200 stamps for the Postal Service, but is best known for his space stamp designs. Cayley had exclusive access to NASA and was able to watch Neil Armstrong rehearse the step off the platform before designing the stamp. Here is the 25th anniversary cover of the first Men on the Moon, featuring 4 of my top 20 stamps. We return to Earth and take a trip north of the border for our number 5 stamp. The Blue Nose is widely recognized as the most beautiful stamp ever issued in the world. The 1929 High Value issue only had 1 million copies printed and has held its value quite well over the years. The ship is pictured as a racing vessel, and it won every race it entered, but was actually a fishing vessel that still holds the world record with over 300,000 pounds of cod hauled in on one trip. Several other Blue Nose stamps have been issued since the original, the most recent being from the summer of 2021 on this souvenir sheet. The undefeated racing ship was sold and became a banana boat in the Caribbean before being shipwrecked on a reef. Today, a replica Blue Nose number 2 still sails the waters around Newfoundland. Now we venture outside the realm of postage stamps for number 4 on the countdown. I remember this stamp on my father's hunting license about a year before I became a stamp collector. What I wouldn't give to have that stamp with his signature on it today. It turns out that this was the first migratory bird hunting stamp, or duck stamp as they are commonly called, to be printed in more than one color. It also turns out to be the most popular duck stamp of all time. Shortly after this stamp was printed, the law changed, requiring that all future duck stamps have living waterfowl only. Number 3 has an interesting story behind it. Number 20 led to the start of a collection. Number 3 shares the same distinction. Remember that I collected plate blocks from my birth date up to the present day in 1982. This was the one plate block from 1956 that was missing from that collection. In 1980, the catalog value for this block of stamps was nearing $1,000. In 2017, the catalog value had dropped to about a third of that, and I managed to find this block on eBay for less than $100. I was compelled to buy it as I had wanted it for so many years and it seemed out of reach. I didn't have an album, so I mounted it in a black mount and put it in a screw-down baseball card holder so I could carry it around and show it to people. That plate block led to the start of my third and final stamp collection. In 2016, I started collecting mint singles from 1920 to the present day. I stopped collecting U.S. stamps at the end of 2018 and now collect selected global issues to include a few U.S. stamps each year. The stamp at number 2 on the countdown also launched a stamp collection. Every summer in my childhood, I spent a week at my grandmother Turner's house. One day, we walked up the steep hill to the mailbox to get the mail. That day, I noticed a stamp that was quite different from all the others. Most of the stamps of the day just had boring old men on them. The Fort Sumpter Centennial stamp had a cannon and a soldier, just what every 7-year-old boy wants. As soon as I saw the stamp, I knew I wanted to keep it. I didn't learn until later in life that those weren't cannon bursts in the background, but fronds of the palmetto tree, the state tree of South Carolina. Here are all 4 plate positions in plate blocks. What could possibly top stamp number 2 in the countdown? I now present my all-time personal favorite postage stamp. This is the single stamp from my original collection that survived into my second collection. I was told that we didn't have room to take everything in a family move, so I picked this stamp to keep. It was one of the few mint stamps in my collection at the time. It would be years before I learned more about the stamp's history. This is probably the quickest stamp ever produced by the post office. Public demand for a stamp to celebrate Charles Lindbergh's solo crossing of the Atlantic Ocean was tremendous. Lindbergh's flight ended in Paris, France on May the 27th, 1927. The stamp was issued on June the 18th, 1927, just 20 days later. The stamp was quite controversial at the time, as Lindbergh's name appeared on the stamp while he was still very much alive. The post office maintained a policy of only issuing stamps honoring people after they were deceased. This sheet of 50 stamps was a very big moment in my philatelic career. I never thought I would be able to afford a sheet like this. There are some separations in the perforations, both vertically and horizontally, that don't show up on this scan. That made the price much more palatable, and now that it is in my mint sheet album, I have no plans to ever move it. The booklet and booklet panes were a natural progression to expand my Scott number C10 collection. The booklet added 1 cent to the purchase price of the stamps. Many collectors of the day ignored the booklet stamps, thinking they were the same as the sheet stamp. I learned that the used booklet pane was very rare and scarce. I happened to run across this beautiful example which I couldn't resist due to its great centering and light cancel. The post office only issued 145,560 booklets, and the stamps were only used for 35 days before the rate dropped to 5 cents for airmail. Although it is not in the countdown, I couldn't help but show off the crown jewel in my collection. I have a photocopy of the letter to Mr. Chamberlain indicating that I have enclosed the envelope that Colonel Lindbergh signed for you. Now you've seen my countdown of my top 20 stamps of all time. I appreciate you taking time to watch the presentation. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified of future presentations.